I never thought I'd be the kind of man who walks out of his own house without a word. Not after 35 years, 2 kids, and a lifetime of choosing silence over storms. But I did. I left my coffee half full, my jacket on the hook, and my wedding ring on the edge of the kitchen sink, a quiet little symbol drowning in dishwater. It started with my daughter, Megan, 23, heartbroken, trembling in my doorway like a wounded animal. Makeup smeared, eyes swollen, clutching her phone like it held the cure to her suffering. Dad, her voice cracked. He cheated on me. With my best friend. I don't know what to do. Now, a younger me might have rushed to comfort her. Might have played the doting father. But the years carved grooves into a man, and I'd spent too many of them digging a trench between what I said and what I really felt. So I looked her in the eye and said, "You deserve what's happening to you." It hit her like a slap. I saw it. That disbelief. That hurt. But I didn't stop. You lied to him. You used him. And now you're shocked he turned around and did the same. I leaned in. If your mother had done something like that to me, I would have left. And that's when it happened. The moment my life, the lie of my life, detonated. My wife laughed. That dry, joyless laugh she gave when something wasn't funny but true. "Then you should have left after my first business trip," she said, casually. 35 years ago. The silence that followed could have split concrete. I didn't ask for clarification. I didn't need it. I looked at Megan. She wasn't shocked. She wasn't even surprised. She knew. They both knew. My daughter had grown up with this truth, lived with it, carried it, while I played house with a woman who'd spent 3.5 decades cheating and smirking and getting away with it. I walked out. No words. No accusations. No dramatics. I just left. And the part that stuck with me, the part that gnawed at the inside of my ribs as I drove into the night with nothing but my name and my wallet, was how easy it was. Like stepping out of a prison I hadn't realized I built with my own hands. I disappeared. 3 days. No calls. No texts. I went somewhere no one knew my name. A cheap roadside motel with buzzing lights and paper-thin walls, but at least the silence there was honest. Then, on the third night, my phone vibrated off the table. Missed calls. 1. 5. A dozen. 30. 99 by the time the sun rose. They knew. They'd found out what I'd done. My revenge wasn't loud. It wasn't violent. It was surgical, quiet, precise, devastating. Because when a man's been lied to for 35 years, he doesn't explode. He removes. 3 days. That's all it took for the house of cards to start folding. 99 missed calls. A perfect little number. Like they'd each taken turns, panicking in shifts. Megan. Then her mother. Then back again. Probably pacing that same kitchen floor I built with my bare hands, wondering how I'd vanished so cleanly. Like smoke slipping through a crack in the window. But see, I didn't vanish. I relocated into clarity. What did I do? I gave them exactly what they never expected, the absence of me. I'd spent 3 decades being the glue. Not flashy, not poetic, just reliable. The one who fixed the gutter, paid the taxes, remembered birthdays. The man who took his vows seriously even when his wife treated hers like a loose suggestion. But after her confession, that laugh, that flippant little dagger, I went back in my mind to every moment that suddenly didn't make sense. Every business trip that ran a little long. Every girl's weekend that came back with perfume that wasn't hers. Every night she came home distant, distracted, full of empty smiles and the scent of another man's cologne masked under cheap hotel soap. And Megan? My daughter. My blood. She knew. Which meant they'd kept this secret together. They turned my life into a performance and handed me the role of the clueless husband, a role I played to perfection, apparently. So no, I didn't yell. I made arrangements. By the time they realized I was gone, so was my name from every joint account, every investment portfolio. The trust one had built, that they believed they would inherit, had been rewritten with the stroke of a pen. You see, about 10 years ago, I got smart. I started funneling profits from a side business into a private account under a shell company. A nice little venture in timberland real estate. Boring, invisible, lucrative. And wouldn't you know, all that loyalty I showed, all that stick it out through thick and thin garbage they used to applaud me for, it came with receipts. I had evidence, proof, emails, transaction records, photos, documents. And the best part? The attorney I'd been seeing for estate planning was actually a bulldog of a divorce strategist. Ironclad prenup? Nope. Not when you've got 35 years of betrayal to back you up. Courts look at that sort of thing. So while they were ringing my phone off the hook, I was sitting across from a notary signing over the deed to the lake house to a scholarship fund I created. In my daughter's name. For someone else's daughter. Let that sink in. By the time they'd wake up to reality, their comfortable world would be reduced to whispers, rumors, and legal notices they didn't understand. That's the thing about revenge. The best kind is quiet. No drama. No confrontations. Just the sudden realization that the man you mocked, the one you dismissed as harmless and loyal and tame, was 3 steps ahead and walking away with everything. Let them call. Let them beg. They say betrayal makes a man dangerous. I disagree. Betrayal just clears the fog. It reveals what was always there, hiding beneath the routine. The man I became after that kitchen moment, after that laugh from my wife, he wasn't new. He was just awake. By the 4th day, I stopped checking my phone. It sat on the motel nightstand like a museum piece, buzzing occasionally, blinking with desperation. Missed calls, voicemails, texts that began with, "We need to talk," and quickly escalated to, "What did you do?" Funny. For 35 years, they never once asked me what I wanted. Now they couldn't stop. I stood at the mirror in that motel bathroom and looked at the man they had underestimated. Not the aging husband. Not the dad who brought the turkey to Thanksgiving or unclogged the gutters without being asked. No, I saw the man who held the master keys to everything they took for granted. The house? In my name. The cars? Financed under my business. The savings? Carefully stacked under LLCs they couldn't trace without a map I burned the day I walked out. And then there was the safe. A literal one, tucked behind an old bookshelf in my workshop. They didn't even know it existed. Inside, photocopies of receipts, printed emails, an old USB drive loaded with decades of digital evidence. Photographs I never showed. Conversations I recorded when I started suspecting something. It turns out when you live with liars, your instinct sharpens, even if your heart drags its feet. I'd already delivered everything to my lawyer before I left. Call it an insurance policy. See, the courts care about patterns. And I had a pattern that stretched back to the Reagan administration. All those business trips she took, paid for by my work bonuses. And while she was off in hotels with God knows who, I was home reading bedtime stories and explaining to our daughter why mommy had to work, just a little harder than the rest of us. And Megan? That little act of hers in the kitchen, the tears, the trembling voice, it was a performance. But I knew her type. I'd raised her type. Just like her mother, she thought men were either pawns or spectators. She didn't expect me to flip the table. I didn't answer her calls. But I did send her one thing, a screenshot. It was the trust transfer form, the one that used to have her name on it. Used to. The caption I typed underneath was simple, earn your legacy. Or lose it. The next day, my attorney called. Said the bank reported attempts to access frozen funds. Said my wife's name bounced off account permissions like a bird hitting glass. I assume this is intentional, he asked. Oh, it's very intentional, I said. Let them learn what consequences feel like. It was never about the money. It was about value. And I finally realized they never valued me. But they were about to learn the man they called soft, slow, dull. He had the sharpest teeth of all. Day 5. That morning, the motel clerk slipped my invoice under the door. I didn't need it. I already knew how much the solitude had cost me. Exactly $437 and change. A cheap price for clarity. The silence, on the other hand, was priceless. I sat on the edge of that stiff bed, coffee in one hand, envelope in the other, and smiled. Not because I was happy. No. Happiness had long since left the equation. I smiled because the plan was moving faster than expected. You'd think after 35 years of playing me, they'd be better at this. My wife, no, let's start using her real name now, Linda, had finally sent an actual message instead of blowing up my voicemail with fake panic and guilt-flavored please. Please come home. We need to talk. Megan's a wreck. You've made your point. No, Linda. I hadn't even started. See, what they didn't know, what they never bothered to learn, was that I'm not a man who burns things down in anger. I deconstruct. I dismantle. Quietly. Piece by piece, like a carpenter taking apart his own work, plank by plank, until all that's left is a pile of shame and nails. That same afternoon, I had lunch with a man named Carl Dobbins. Retired now, but for 30 years, he was the accountant for the company I used to consult for. Real sharp guy. Paranoid, too. He taught me a long time ago how to move things in silence, legally, discreetly, and with the kind of plausible deniability that makes banks nervous. We met at a diner, same one we used to hit during tax season. He brought a folder. Inside it was the new draft of my will, the trust amendments, and the final paperwork for what I like to call the extraction. Linda and Megan were officially disinherited. The trust? Redirected to a program that helped men recover after divorce and domestic betrayal. The vacation home in Idaho? Sold. Funds wired into an anonymous endowment. The wedding ring? Pawned. Money donated to a battered men's shelter in her name. Poetic? Sure. But I wasn't done. Linda had an art show coming up. Small-town gallery. She was always the creative spirit, while I paid the mortgage and ate cold dinners alone. I'd funded the entire exhibit. Paid for the gallery, the printing, the frames. My name wasn't on it, of course. It was all through one of my LLCs. So I called the gallery manager and canceled everything. Refunds issued. Date scrubbed. She wouldn't know until the morning of the event when no one showed up. Then I sent her one final message. This is not revenge. This is accountability. You gambled our marriage for cheap thrills. Megan watched you and followed your blueprint. You taught her how to lie, manipulate, and take. I'm done funding your failure. You were never faithful, and now you're finally free. Free to pay your own bills. Free to wonder where the foundation went. And Megan? Tell her this. Inheritances are earned, not assumed. Good luck rebuilding. I hit send. 5 minutes later, my phone rang again. Voicemail. Then another. Then another. Then Megan. Dad, you don't understand. I didn't know how to stop it. Mom said. Click. I didn't need to hear the rest. Let them drown in the silence they once forced me to live in. On the morning of day 6, Linda tried to get clever. I was eating eggs at a diner off Highway 40, the kind of place where the waitress calls you hon, and the coffee refills until your nerves fray. My phone buzzed once, twice, then again in rapid-fire succession. She'd finally stopped crying. Now she was threatening. The first text read, You think you can just erase 35 years like they meant nothing? The second, I'll contest the will. Megan will too. The third, bolder now. Our names are still on the house. Try anything, and I'll drag you through court. There it was. The mask slipping. The self-pity turned to desperation, and then to the final stage, aggression dressed as entitlement. I stirred cream into my coffee and stared out the window. I didn't reply right away, because I wanted her to stew in the question, what else does he know? Truth was, I'd anticipated this exact tantrum. That's the difference between revenge and retaliation. Revenge is patient. I hadn't just covered my tracks. I'd laced them with landmines. The house? Technically, yes, both our names were on the original deed. Until 6 months ago. Linda had signed a power of attorney over to me during her knee surgery recovery. Simple little form, slid between a stack of hospital release documents. I even made her soup that day. I used that signature to initiate a deed transfer into a revocable living trust under my name. Perfectly legal. Perfectly quiet. She was too busy watching reruns in bed and complaining about pain meds to notice. Megan? Her name had never been on anything. Just expectations and assumptions. I texted back. Disputing the will would mean opening up our financial history in court. All of it. Want to explain 35 years of off-the-books vacations? Want to explain Julian? Chris? Should I keep going? A pause. Then another text from her, slower this time. What do you want, Richard? What did I want? God. I used to ask myself that question while standing in our kitchen at 11 p.m., reheating leftovers from the dinner I'd paid for but hadn't been invited to. I used to want peace, loyalty, some damn appreciation. Now, I wanted them honest. So I gave her the answer she wasn't expecting. Nothing. That's the point. You had everything, and now you have nothing. Consider it balance. That same afternoon, I stopped by my lawyer's office. Just to be thorough, I added a clause to the will. If either Linda or Megan contested it, they'd forfeit even the sentimental heirlooms. The photo albums. The jewelry. The silver set from my mother. And I wasn't done. I uploaded the documentation, the full 35-year financial trail of infidelity and fraud, to a secure cloud drive. Then I shared access with one person, Megan's fiancé. He was due to propose next month. I figured he deserved to know what sort of blood he was about to marry into. There was a folder labeled simply, How She Learned to Lie. Now let's pause for a moment and answer the obvious question. Did I feel like a monster? No. I felt free. The first genuine breath in decades. Revenge didn't taste like fire. It tasted like oxygen. By day 7, Linda stopped trying to reach me directly. The voicemails had dried up. The threats fizzled. Now she pivoted, the way a politician does when caught mid-scandal. Same smirk, new script. She started planting stories. My sister called me first. Hey, I don't want to get in the middle of anything, she said, which is always how people start when they've already jumped right into the center of it. But Linda's been telling people you've been having some sort of midlife breakdown. I chuckled. There it was. Her plan B. When you can't gaslight your husband, try gaslighting everyone else. Linda was telling people I'd snapped after Megan's breakup, that I was emotionally volatile, had been withdrawing for months, and this was the real kicker, might be seeing someone. She always did have a flair for irony. See, this is what cheaters do when they lose control. They smear. They paint you as unstable so they don't have to explain their own rot. Because no one wants to admit they got caught lying. It's easier to say the other person just went crazy. But Linda underestimated one thing: receipts. I'd spent the last 6 months compiling a digital archive, so damning it made Watergate look like a parking ticket. Screenshots, bank transfers, emails, burner phone logs, even a video clip from that New Year's Eve in 2011 where she'd missed the countdown, but her GPS didn't. And unlike her, I didn't gossip, I published. That evening, I sent out a link. Quietly, selectively. A dozen people. Her closest friends, our extended family, Megan's godparents. Just a short note. In case you're hearing another version of the story, here's mine with evidence. R. The folder was called 35 Years of Make-Believe. Inside, timestamped betrayal. It took about an hour for the first response to roll in. My cousin, a lawyer, replied, "Holy hell, Rich." She was screwing half the phone book. An old friend messaged, "I always knew she talked down to you." I didn't know it went that deep. "I'm sorry." And then, silence. Not from me. From them. Linda's social orbit, the one she floated around in like some sad little queen of suburban delusion, began to collapse. Slowly at first. Texts left on read. Group chats that dried up. Invitations she used to get? Gone. Even her Pilates instructor, who used to call her babe, started calling her Mrs. Chapman. The loneliness she thought she could project onto me was now hers. The isolation she tried to weaponize had boomeranged. As for Megan, she didn't call that day. I assumed she was licking wounds of her own, the kind that don't bleed, but sting every time your name's left off a beneficiary list. Because now she was learning. You don't inherit character, you earn it. It happened on a Sunday. Of course it did. Linda always loved her little dramas dressed in Sunday best. The setting? The country club. A place she frequented more than church, always touting it as a sanctuary for the refined. Funny how she only ever brought Megan or her girlfriends, never me. I was the utility husband, not the aesthetic. I was invited that day. By name. A charity brunch. Some silent auction for rescued greyhounds. I donated anonymously the year prior. I guess someone figured Richard Chapman was still worth including. Linda didn't know I was coming. She stood near the mimosa bar, wrapped in something pastel and expensive, surrounded by her usual backup singers, half of whom had already read the 35 Years of Make-Believe file I sent out. Their smiles looked painted on, polite in the way people are right before they abandon ship. She spotted me halfway through my first coffee. Eyes locked. Smile froze. It was the kind of moment that could have passed quietly, two estranged people nodding in social truce. But no, not Linda. She walked straight up, hands shaking slightly, not from emotion, but from rage disguised as concern. She was going to perform. Right here. In front of the brunch crowd. "Richard," she said, loud enough for heads to turn. "Why are you doing this? To me? To Megan? To our family? God, she even wore perfume I used to love. The one she started using the same year her business partner took her to Toronto." I sipped my coffee. Then I said, calmly, "Which part? The exposure? The financial severance? The removal of your name from the estate?" She blinked, thrown off by how quiet I was. "You're humiliating me." That got some gasps from the nearby table. Theatrics. Classic Linda. Pull the sympathy card before anyone checks the deck. So I pulled out my phone. Airdropped a file to the public screen where they were cycling through Greyhound adoption videos. Title, clarifying the narrative. And boom, the slideshow began. Photos. Date-stamped texts. Hotel receipts. A photo of Linda in a silk robe in 1999 with a handwritten note that read, "Till next time, a C." The room gasped. She tried to rush the screen, but it was too late. The projector clicked through proof like clockwork. No sound. Just facts. Someone from the board cut the feed, But the damage was done. Eyes turned. Whispered names. People who had smiled at her seconds ago were now suddenly interested in their water glasses. She looked at me like I'd stabbed her. But I hadn't. I'd just taken the knife she used on me for decades and laid it on the table. I told the truth, I said. You just hate how ugly it is. She whispered something. I didn't catch it. Maybe she cursed me. Maybe she asked for forgiveness. Or maybe she realized, for the first time in 35 years, that I was never the fool in the story. I was just waiting for the right act. I left before dessert. She stood there trembling, mascara cracking like the marriage she wore as armor. And as I passed the valet stand, I caught a glimpse of Megan arriving late, just in time to see her mother unravel in public. Poetic, really. A daughter walking into the ruins of the castle her mother built on lies. The message came that night. Megan, Dad, can we talk? Please. I didn't know it was that bad. I almost didn't respond. I stared at the screen for a while, watching her words sit there like some broken toy, a thing she never valued until it stopped working for her. I used to jump when she needed me. College tuition hiccup? I paid it. First apartment after she blew through her savings? I co-signed. Emotional meltdown over a breakup? I took the day off work to sit with her in silence. She loved me most when I was useful, respected me least when I was consistent. But now? Now she was facing something new. Consequences. I agreed to meet. Neutral ground, the park by the lake where I used to take her fishing as a kid. She hated it then, but pretended to love it because it made me happy. Funny how pretending became the family sport. She was already waiting when I arrived. Dressed in yoga casual, oversized sunglasses, coffee cup in hand, like she was heading to brunch instead of meeting the father she'd quietly thrown under a bus. She stood when I approached. Hi, Dad. I nodded. Saturday. She didn't waste time. You embarrass Mom. I let the silence stretch so long she squirmed. That was always her tell. She hated being uncomfortable. She was raised in comfort, floated in it. Earned nothing, inherited everything. You think I embarrassed her? I finally said. She did that all by herself? I just held up the mirror. Megan sighed, like the victim in some soap opera. Why did you have to do all this publicly? Oh, I don't know. Maybe because privately was where your mother did most of her damage. Privately is where she cheated, lied, mocked me in group chats. Privately is where you joined her. Her jaw tensed. That chat wasn't serious. You laughed at me. I said it flat. No emotion. Because truth doesn't need to yell. You laughed about how I'd never figure it out. How I was just a sweet old pushover. Megan didn't respond. You could have been better, I said. You could have looked at your mother's example and thought, I'll be the one who breaks the pattern. But you didn't. You mimicked her. You molded yourself in her image. And now that the money's gone and the stories don't work, you're panicking. Tears welled. Real ones? Maybe. But tears without change are just emotional blackmail. I didn't mean to hurt you, she said. No, I replied. You just didn't care if you did. That stung. I saw it land. She sniffled. You're really cutting me out of the will? I turned to face her fully. I gave you 23 years of love, of protection. I gave you my time, my money, my presence. But you chose your mother's version of success, manipulation, entitlement, appearances. Then I leaned in, voice low. You'll get nothing from me unless you earn it. No handouts. No inheritance. No bailouts. Not because I hate you, but because I finally love myself more than the role you wrote for me. She didn't speak. Didn't try to hug me. Just sat there stunned, small, and suddenly real. Good. Because broken people only rebuild after the illusion of power is shattered. 2 days passed. No calls. No texts. No updates from Linda. No new theatrics from Megan. Just silence. Not the eerie kind, the earned kind. The kind of silence a man buys with boundaries and finally enforced consequences. I'd moved into a furnished apartment on the edge of town. Small place. 1 bedroom. Hardwood floors, good light. No shrine to a past life. No forced smiles hanging in frames. Just space. Mine. On the 3rd day, I got a letter. A real one. Handwritten. In Megan's script, the same looping, careful strokes she used when she was 12 and trying to impress me with perfect cursive. Dad. I know I said a lot of things I didn't mean. And worse, I laughed at things I didn't even understand. I went along with Mom because it was easy, because she made it normal. I didn't know how much she had taken from you until you finally took it back. I've spent my whole life thinking you were boring. But now I see you were patient. Kind. You stayed when anyone else would have left. I don't expect forgiveness. But I want to change. I'm scared I've already become her. And I don't want that. Please tell me it's not too late. Love, Megan. I read it twice. Then I folded it and set it in the drawer next to the bed, right beside a photo of her as a little girl, on my shoulders at the county fair, holding cotton candy in one hand and a balloon in the other. She didn't become her mother overnight. That kind of rot spread slowly, over years, in jokes, in compromises, in watching betrayal go unchecked and deciding, that's just how people are. I sat with that letter, thought about her tears, her voice in the park, her life ahead, and then I wrote back, Megan, you don't owe me a perfect apology. You owe yourself a better future. I can't erase what happened. I won't pretend your choices didn't hurt me. But I also know this. It's harder to change when you're raised by people who never had to. Here's what I'll offer you. I'm not putting you back in the will. Not yet. But I'll give you something more valuable. A chance to prove who you are without the safety net of my money. You want to be different than your mother? Then build something. Work. Earn. Tell the truth even when it costs you. And maybe one day, we'll sit at a table again, not as father and daughter tied by obligation, but as two people who respect the hell out of each other. Until then, don't call me dad. Not until you remember what it means. Brutal? Maybe. But redemption doesn't start with hugs. It starts with standards. It came by courier. Cream-colored envelope. Heavy stock. Embossed in gold with a law firm's logo. Fancy. Expensive. Just like Linda used to be. All surface, no soul. Inside, a letter from her attorney. Short and venom-laced. Mrs. Chapman is seeking equitable compensation for the emotional distress, reputational damage, and disruption of lifestyle caused by Mr. Chapman's recent conduct and public disclosures. We are prepared to pursue legal action if restitution is not negotiated. Restitution. They wanted money. The woman who spent 35 years living off my sacrifices. Who built an empire of deception on my dime. Who cheated, laughed about it, and taught our daughter how to lie with a smile. Now she wanted compensation because her glass house got hit with the truth. I read it. Once. Twice. Didn't flinch. Then I picked up the phone. Tom, I said, dialing my lawyer. We're going nuclear. Tom knew what that meant. We talked about the possibility back in the early days of my awakening. Back when the idea of taking action felt like betrayal. Now I knew better. Letting betrayal fester? That was the real sin. We filed our response within 48 hours. It wasn't just a rejection. It was a message. Mrs. Chapman's distress is not the result of Mr. Chapman's actions, but of her own provable misconduct over 3 decades. Should she pursue litigation, we are prepared to disclose full records of her extramarital affairs, financial manipulation, fraudulent business deductions, and defamation through private communications. We remind Mrs. Chapman's counsel that all marital assets were already distributed through a court-validated revocable trust. Any attempt to disrupt those proceedings will be considered malicious prosecution. Should they proceed, Mr. Chapman reserves the right to countersue for slander, emotional abuse, and financial misconduct. And I included something else, just for Linda. A letter. Direct. Personal. Final. Linda, you want compensation? You had it. In every dollar I earned. Every moment I stayed silent. Every day I pretended we were something we weren't so our daughter wouldn't grow up in ruins. You made me look like a fool. You trained Megan to follow in your shadow. And now, when the mirror finally cracked, you blamed the light. Here's my offer. Walk away. Quietly. No money. No trial. No more performance. If you push this, everything you've done, every lie, every affair, every receipt, becomes public record. Court transcripts. Media accessible. Permanent. This isn't a negotiation. It's mercy. And it's the last thing I'll ever give you. Richard. She didn't respond. But I got a call from Tom the next day. Linda's attorney had quietly withdrawn the petition. No public statement. No fight. Just silence. Surrender. That was her final move. Not a bang, a whimper. Everything she built on stolen trust collapsed the moment she had to stand on her own. And me? I finally stood taller than I ever had. Not because I destroyed her, but because I refused to be destroyed anymore. Once the smoke clears, once the letters stop, the voicemails fade, and the house you walked away from finally burns itself down, there's a silence that settles in. But it's not the kind of silence people dread. It's the kind that feels like standing in an empty field where a rotten house once stood. Sure, there's ash. There's memory. But there's also space. And space is freedom. The day after Linda folded and Megan went quiet, I did something no one expected, especially me. I went shopping. Not for a car. Not for some flashy new bachelor pad. I walked into a hardware store. Picked out lumber, drywall, new tools. Not for show. Not for revenge. But because for the first time in decades, I wanted to build something for me. I bought a small fixer-upper on the edge of town. Abandoned for years. Roof sagging, porch cracked, weeds taller than the mailbox. Most people saw it as a teardown. I saw a blank canvas. The same way I used to look at Linda back when we were young, and I thought love could fill in the missing parts of a broken person. No, I wasn't looking to fix anyone. Just a house. Something I could rebuild with my own hands. Where every nail driven was mine. Every beam measured. Every corner reinforced. No secrets in the walls. No rot under the floorboards. Just structure. Something honest. The first day I started work, I brought a thermos of black coffee and an old boombox. I played Springsteen. Because of course I did. The sun beat down. My shirt stuck to my back. I swung a hammer, and the sound echoed off empty rooms. And I smiled. Not because I was healed, but because I was healing. Every nail I drove in, every rotten board I tore out, was another piece of that 35-year fiction being ripped from my skin. Neighbors slowed down as they passed. A few waved. One older man with a dog said, "You sure you want to save that place?" I wiped sweat from my brow. "Yeah," I said. "It's still got bones." That night, I sat on the porch. No furniture. Just me, the stars, and the creak of old wood under my boots. And I realized something. For so long, I had poured myself into people, into a woman who weaponized affection, into a daughter who mirrored deception. I gave everything, and they spin it like it was theirs by birthright. But this rebuild? This solitude? It was mine. There was peace in knowing no one was going to knock on that door and ask for more. No lies beneath the floorboards. No lipstick on receipts. No burner phones hidden in robe pockets. Just the honest ache of muscles after a long day's work. The kind of pain that tells you you're building something real. It was just afternoon when I heard the crunch of tires on gravel. I'd been sanding window frames all morning, hands coated in dust, sweat drying under the collar of my shirt. I wasn't expecting visitors. Didn't want any, truth be told. But when I looked up from the front steps of that half-gutted house, I saw her. Megan. She didn't drive her usual car, the cherry red coupe I once helped her co-sign. No, this was different. Modest. A little banged up. She parked at the edge of the lot like she didn't know if she had the right to come any closer. That was the first time I saw it. Not just guilt. Not the performative sadness she used to use when she needed something. This time, it was humility. She walked slowly. No makeup. Hoodie. Hands in her pockets like a kid about to confess to the principal. "Hey," she said, standing by the porch stairs. I nodded. "Hey." She looked at the house. Then at me. "You, building this place yourself?" Piece by piece. Pause. Her lip quivered. She bit it back. "It's beautiful." I laughed. Not cruel. Just honest. "It's a dump." "Yeah," she smiled faintly. "But it's your dump." That hit harder than she probably realized. I motioned toward a pair of buckets I'd been using as seats. "If you're not afraid of splinters." She sat, crossed her legs, picked at a thread on her sleeve. "I wanted to come earlier," she said, voice quiet. But I didn't know what to say that wouldn't sound like an excuse. I didn't rush her. Let her find the words. She took a breath. "I've been volunteering. At the community center." I raised an eyebrow. "Just a couple nights a week. Helping teens with applications, tutoring some math. I'm not great at it." But she trailed off, then looked me in the eye. I wanted to do something that didn't involve asking for anything. Just giving. That was the first real thing I'd heard from her in years. Not rehearsed. Not filtered through her mother's selfish lens. Just truth. I let it hang between us a while. Then, "Why now?" Megan looked down at her hands. "Because when you cut me off, it wasn't just the money I lost. It was the belief that I was a good person. And it made me wonder if I ever actually was one. Or if I just learned how to fake it from Mom." She swallowed hard. "I want to build something too. Not for you. Not even for redemption. Just because I don't want to be her." There it was. Raw. Unpolished. Finally, herself. I looked out at the road. Took a long breath. "I won't give you the life you had before," I said. "I'm not your safety net. I'm not your ATM. But if you're serious, if you want to build something real, you can come by on weekends." Her eyes widened. "Really? Don't get excited. You're not getting a dime." She nodded quickly. "I know. You'll get a hammer, a paintbrush, maybe a few splinters. And if you last longer than the first afternoon, I'll think about letting you borrow my good tools." She laughed, quietly, the way she used to when she was small, chasing fireflies in the backyard, barefoot and fearless. For the first time in what felt like forever, we didn't feel like strangers. Not fixed, not healed, but rebuilding. Together. She showed up on a Thursday. I was mid-swing with a framing hammer, Megan holding a board steady while we reinforced the kitchen archway. We'd been at it for 3 weekends now. No skip days, no drama. Just sweat, grit, and the occasional shared sandwich from the corner deli. Then a car pulled into the drive. It was black, sleek, impractical. Something a person drives when they're still pretending they haven't lost everything but the illusion. Linda stepped out. Designer sunglasses. Tight white blouse. Heels that made no sense on gravel. Her hair was done. Her nails painted. She looked ready for a magazine shoot, not the ruins of the life she left behind. Megan froze. Linda didn't walk up. She posed, like a specter waiting for someone to invite her across a threshold. I walked to the edge of the porch. Didn't say a word. She took the glasses off, eyes puffy beneath the mask. Not a full cry, just the kind of long, slow breakdown that comes after you've screamed at a steering wheel for 45 minutes with no one listening. "I just want to talk," she said. "Go ahead." Her lips parted, but nothing came out. She hadn't expected that. She expected a door opening, a gesture, a "come inside," something she could use. But she got me. Silent. Still. Done. Megan stepped beside me, not behind. Beside. Covered in sawdust and sweat. A stark contrast to Linda's polished plastic. "What do you want, Mom?" Megan asked. Not angry. Not scared. Just tired. Linda looked between us. That old calculating glint flickered behind her eyes, but there was nowhere to go with it. No angle to play. No sympathy to harvest. "I just thought," she started, "maybe we could find some kind of peace." I let the words hang there. "Peace," I said. "That comes after war, not after betrayal." She took a step forward. "I made mistakes, but I was hurting too." I nodded slowly. "So was I. Difference is, I didn't turn my pain into a weapon." "You're not being fair." "No," I said. "I'm being honest. You confuse the two because you've never faced either." She blinked, visibly shaken. The makeup cracked a little at the corners of her mouth. Megan crossed her arms. "What did you think would happen? That you'd show up, shed a few tears, and we'd hand you the past back? I'm still your mother." "No," Megan cut in. "You're the woman who raised me to lie like her." "That's not the same thing." I damn near flinched at that. Linda stumbled back half a step. The truth had weight now, real weight, and no amount of designer clothing could armor her against it. "I don't want money," she finally whispered. "Good," I said, "because there's nothing left for you here. Not a dime, not a key, not a crack in the door." Linda looked around the property, the stripped walls, the new beams, the firewood stacked by hand. This wasn't her world anymore. She couldn't play queen in a kingdom she never helped build. Then she did what narcissists do when the mask finally stops working. She begged, "I miss you, Richard." I stared at her. "No, you miss control. Big difference." And with that, I stepped off the porch, walked past her, went back inside. Megan followed. We didn't look back. The gravel crunched again 15 minutes later. Then silence. Linda was gone. This time for good. No blowout. No dramatic scene. Just a woman who'd bet everything on charm, and finally watched the table fold. The air started changing after Linda left. Not just outside, though fall was finally crawling in, painting the trees with gold and rust, but inside me. Inside the house. Inside the quiet. There was no more waiting for the other shoe to drop. No more dread disguised as duty. The house didn't carry ghosts anymore, just echoes of things I chose to remember. Megan kept showing up, not out of obligation. She brought coffee now, sometimes tools. Once, a plant. A scrawny little fern she said would probably die, but deserved a shot, just like us. I laughed harder at that than I had in months. And I realized something strange, something that snuck up on me like the way dust settles after demolition. We weren't repairing a house. We were becoming something new inside one. Megan worked hard. Blistered hands. Splinters. Paint in her hair. She never once asked for thanks. One night, after hauling in reclaimed flooring, she dropped onto the porch steps beside me, stretched her back, and said, "You know what I realized?" I shook my head. Mom raised me to see people as resources. not relationships. It's why I never noticed how much you gave, because in that world, giving isn't love. It's leverage. I said nothing, just sipped my coffee. Let her speak. She looked out over the gravel, the grass slowly reclaiming the front yard. I was shallow, lazy, selfish. You were young, I said. She shook her head. I was worse than that. I was blind, but not anymore. We sat in silence. Then she reached into her backpack and pulled out a small frame. It was the old photo. Me. Her. County Fair. Her little fingers clutching my shirt collar, cotton candy in her other hand. She'd cleaned it, wiped the smudges, put it behind glass. Hang it somewhere, she asked. Not as a trophy, just a marker. I took it, held it for a long time, then nodded. Yeah, I said. Yeah, it's earned now. That weekend, we finished the living room. Clean wood, neutral tones, light coming through the windows like it belonged. No shadows from Linda, no echoes of manipulation, just space. Honest space. We cooked dinner on a portable stove, ate on the floor. Megan told me she was looking into night classes, finance, of all things. Wanted to understand the world she'd once taken for granted. I want to be better than what raised me, she said. I looked at her, not with the pain of a betrayed father, but with the cautious pride of a man who'd stopped asking who she had been and started seeing who she could be. Forgiveness? No, but trust, earned trust, was growing roots. And in the garden out back, that pathetic fern she planted, it started sprouting new leaves. Sometimes things bloom where the rot's been cleared, not because they were meant to, but because someone finally made the ground worth growing in. The knock came just after dusk. The porch light had just flickered on, motion sensor wired in last weekend. Megan was upstairs, brushing a fresh coat of paint on what would soon be the guest room. The air smelled like pine and possibility. I opened the door, and there she was. Elena, not a ghost, not a memory. A woman standing on the edge of a life she once almost changed, and now, maybe, could touch again. Hi, Richard, she said, voice soft. Same as ever. No rehearsed tone. No apology wrapped in perfume. Just truth. The way only people who once shared real silence together can manage. I hadn't seen her in almost 20 years. We met before Linda, back in the days when I was just some broke engineering student with calloused hands and more decency than confidence. Elena was spark and depth, the kind of woman who made you feel like just being honest was enough to keep her around. But I picked Linda. I picked sparkle over substance. I didn't know the difference then. Just knew Linda flirted louder, played harder, made me feel wanted, even if she never made me feel seen. Elena stood there now, older, surer, wiser. There were faint lines around her eyes, but they suited her, like weathered wood on a house that had stood through storms. I hope this isn't too strange, she said, a slight smile forming. Megan found me. Said you might want to talk. I turned and called up the stairs. Megan? She leaned over the railing. I just thought you might want to see someone who knew who you were before all of it. And just like that, she disappeared again, but this time into the house, not out of it. I motioned for Elena to come in. She stepped over the threshold and paused, looking around. It's beautiful, she said. Feels like you. Finally does, I replied. We sat. 2 mugs. No wine, no candles, just hot tea and time. I always wondered, she said, not looking at me, if I could have changed things. If maybe, back then, I should have fought harder for you. I let that sit. Then no, I was the one who made the wrong choice. And you were the one strong enough not to beg me to stay. She nodded. I heard about Linda. I waited. She reached out to me once. Years ago. That made me blink. What? She messaged me on Facebook. Said you were content, but boring. Told me she won. I stared. Not shocked. Just tired. I didn't respond, Elena said. I figured if that was her version of victory, I hadn't lost anything at all. I chuckled. Not out of humor. Out of a strange relief. It all made sense. The cracks in Linda's mask had started long before I'd noticed. Elena took a sip of tea. You look different now. Like a man who's finally breathing air that's his. I am. We talked for hours. No flirting. No old flame cliché. Just 2 people circling back to a conversation that never really ended. When she stood to leave, she touched the edge of the doorway. You know, she said, you're building something here. Not just the house. Something true. Trying, I said. Keep trying, she smiled. I'll be around this time. Then she was gone. But not like before. This time, she didn't vanish. She lingered, in the scent of tea, in the echo of her voice, in the reminder that maybe, just maybe, the man I used to be had found his way back home. The house was finished, not polished, not perfect, but whole. Every beam, every window, every square foot had been touched by my hands, or by Megan's, which in some ways meant more. Not because she owed me, but because she chose to help finish something she never thought she'd be part of. We stood in the living room on a chilly Saturday morning, sunlight coming through clean glass, the walls freshly painted in soft, warm earth tones. A couch, second-hand, but sturdy, faced the brick fireplace we'd laid together, and above it, a single photo. Me and Megan, covered in sawdust, laughing like idiots after we dropped a drywall panel on our feet. No fake smiles. No missing pieces. Just truth. Ready? She asked. I nodded. Yeah. Let's open the doors. We weren't throwing a party. No champagne. No speeches. We invited people who mattered. People who stuck around after the fire. Old friends. My sister. A couple neighbors who dropped off sandwiches and coffee when the porch still had nails sticking out of it. Even Carl, my accountant turned confidant, showed up, holding a six-pack and grinning like a man who knew he backed the right horse. The vibe was casual. Fire crackling. Chili simmering in the kitchen. Laughter echoing down the hallways that once only held memory and regret. And Megan, she floated in the middle of it, sleeves rolled up, greeting people, checking on the food, sharing stories of crooked nails and stubborn floorboards. No one mentioned Linda. Not once. And I realized, that was it. That was her exile. Not a courtroom. Not a shouting match. Just absence. No one asked where she was. No one cared. She was gone. And the world didn't miss her. It's a funny thing. You spend so long afraid of what life will look like when the lie is gone. But once it's out, once it's amputated, everything feels lighter. And that night, as the guests slowly left and the dishes stacked in the sink, Megan sat beside me on the porch. It feels like, this is what I always wanted our house to feel like, she said. I didn't have to answer. She knew. She looked up at the stars, then back down at her hands. I didn't tell you. I got a job. A real one. Entry-level finance clerk. Small office. I start Monday. I smiled. Not the kind I wore to keep the peace all those years. A real one. Quiet. Solid. You'll be great, I said. She looked over. You think? No, I said. I know. And for the first time since she was little, she leaned her head on my shoulder. Not out of guilt. Not out of apology. Just love. Earned. Not expected. Inside the house, the fern she planted months ago had sprouted a new shoot. Bright green. Reaching toward the window like it finally believed in the light. I wasn't expecting mail that day. The weather had turned. A brittle wind rattled the porch chimes, and Megan had taken to wrapping herself in one of those oversized flannel blankets while she worked on her spreadsheets at the kitchen table. We were quiet lately, in a good way. The kind of quiet that only comes when the storm's passed and you've got nothing left to prove to anyone, not even yourself. The mailbox creaked as I opened it. Just a few bills. A local hardware store flyer. In one envelope. No return address. Just my name, in a script I hadn't seen in months, and even then, only scribbled on the margins of court letters and sarcastic holiday cards. Linda. I didn't open it right away. I set it on the workbench in the garage, next to my worn tape measure and the old hammer Megan dropped one day that still had her apology scrawled on the handle. Oops. But I'm learning. 3 hours passed. Then I read it. Richard. If you're reading this, then you haven't blocked me from the last thing I have left, a pen and paper. I don't want anything from you. Not your money. Not your forgiveness. I know I don't deserve either. I've been living in a rental now. It's cold. The walls echo in a way our house never did. Or maybe they did, and I just never heard it until now. I didn't write to apologize. I know what I did. I know what I taught our daughter. I see it every morning when I look in the mirror and realize the reflection isn't beautiful anymore. It's accurate. That's worse. I thought you'd always be there. I thought your silence was permission, that your loyalty was weakness. I never realized it was strength because it never needed to be loud. You were the best man I ever knew, and I destroyed you because I didn't think I could become more. Turns out, I was right. I know you won't respond. That's okay. I just needed you to know one thing before the silence becomes permanent. You won. Linda. I folded the letter slowly. Didn't tear it. Didn't burn it. Just set it back on the bench. Not because it deserved reverence, but because it was proof. Proof that walking away had worked. Not to punish her, not to gloat, but to finally make her see. She'd spent 35 years believing she'd written the story of our marriage. Now she finally realized she'd only ever been a chapter in mine. That night, I told Megan, read the letter aloud while she sat across from me at the table, the two of us lit by the soft amber of a lamp we'd rewired together. When I finished, she didn't say much. Just, she finally saw the man I always should have. And that was worth more than any apology. Because I didn't need Linda's regret. I'd already built something better, a life and a daughter I could stand beside without shame.